going to have to talk about some prerequisites. So there are a number of prerequisites that we basically need to have before we can really make the most out of these other sort of key parts of a successful scalable strategy. These are often the most bitter pill to swallow at the beginning because it's going to require some upfront work, and it's especially better for people who maybe like just rebuilt their website. So the first one we're going to talk about is websites. Essentially, your website is the foundation upon which your SEO plan is built. And with a bad website or with a website that has problems, it's going to be really difficult to create an SEO strategy that will move with your business if the website isn't flexible enough to move with your business. So in this sense, there's a few things that are really important to think about when we're talking about like what do we need to have in place before we can actually create a scalable SEO strategy. I've got them sort of listed here. The first one that was on the list here is page speed. Is your website actually set to load quickly? This is a major factor for Google. It's going to be very difficult to overcome a very slow website. There are a lot of things that we don't understand maybe when we build a website that are kind of trades. Like we oftentimes trade some site speed for like beautiful extra design images that haven't been compressed or optimized. Or maybe we wrote our code on the cheap and it's not super minified. Maybe we have like kind of longer code than we need to have. There's a number of things that might decrease our page speed. I'll show you guys a tool later when we get into the site audit section about how you can really quickly see and identify problems with your site speed. But if you have a slow website, it's going to be very hard to have a successful SEO enterprise. Along the same lines in 2017, if you're not mobile friendly or you're not cross-compatible on devices, Google's just not going to take you seriously. As mobile traffic continues to increase and it becomes more and more obvious that mobile is the future of web surfing, if your website isn't either has a mobile site or isn't responsive, there's just going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for you to compete with other websites in SEO. So this is one of those things where someone might have just built a brand new website. It's like, oh shoot, well we didn't think about this in terms of page speed or in terms of like our mobile capacities or things like that. These things pretty much have to happen as a prerequisite to have a scalable strategy. A few other things that are really important as well. Your site should be secure. If you want to think about, when our business is 2, 3, 4 times as big as it is right now, the potential downfall of an insecure site or an incident or hacking or something like that increases significantly in value. And Google recognizes that as well in terms of SEO. So while SSL certificates are right now like strongly encouraged but not totally required by Google, you can expect that something along those lines will be totally required by Google very shortly. So having this set up is pretty important as well. Some other simple ones: you got to have a blog on your site. If you don't have a vessel for curating and delivering content, Google's not going to take you as seriously, and we'll talk again about that as more during the content part of this. And then lastly, you need to have some sense of a URL structure. There's a lot of different ways you can set up URL structures effectively, but there needs to be at least some kind of an architecture or a strategy that that you can then be planning on the expansion of your site, on the delivery of content, refreshing content that actually has purpose. Just having kind of a loosely organized URL structure can be fine for a very small website, but when you want to scale, it's going to get you in a lot of trouble. These are some of the prerequisites for the website. This one is we actually haven't talked about in one of these videos before. For those of you guys who've sort of attended or visited for these web clinics, we haven't really talked a ton about CRM management. But as we sort of think about scale, this becomes increasingly important in terms of actually utilizing the data that we gather and creating strategy from it. Most of you guys have probably worked at some point with Salesforce or another CRM. It's really, really easy for a CRM to start simple and then get very, very complex, very confusing. Maybe you have one person who built half of it and then they left for another job. Another person shows up and then redoes a different half of it. Or maybe you have so many different lead or opportunity statuses or contact fields that it becomes very difficult to understand like where somebody actually is in your funnel or how it all processes. So my general recommendation here is just try to keep it simple. Think about what really matters as far as organizing your funnel and having data be very clearly displayed. So, and this usually means it's sort of like a less is more, almost like you're editing a book or something like that. You're going to go through and you're going to take out as much stuff as you can to really get down to the stuff that actually really matters. So in this case, a really clear set of lead stages and lead statuses and opportunity stages is great. to understand how are people really traveling through the funnel and which places are the most important. Do you really need those extra 2 or 3 moderately descriptive lead stages or lead statuses, or can they be sort of set aside as you focus on the stuff that actually matters? And then once you've got it simplified and cleaned up, understanding that you need to have clear rules for your team for how to actually keep this data clean and useful. And then lastly, this is a step that we've seen a few of our clients successfully implement, is review their usage. Go back through and actually make sure that your salespeople and the people on your team are actually filling out or using the workflow that you guys have created the way they're supposed to. We've had a few different clients who've looked back and said, oh, this data looks wrong. Like, why is the attribution data only showing us a dozen closed won deals when we had 100 of them? And it's, oh, well, looks like maybe your salespeople just aren't using your system. That's a common thing. Just make sure that your CRM is well kept because it's going to be driving a lot of the strategy that we use when actually developing a SEO plan that will scale. And then the last kind of major prereq to really have successful SEO is a streamlined content production system. One problem that we see often here is the too many cooks in the kitchen problem. Where you have a lot of people who are surrounding content, but they don't have really clearly defined roles. This means that often the ball gets thrown up in the air and nobody knows if they're supposed to go catch it. It also means that a single piece of content that is probably just fine to deliver ends up needing to get approved and reviewed by a half dozen people, which really slows down the process and makes it pretty difficult. So in general, you really need to streamline your production and get the process reviewed with people with really clearly defined roles. So this person writes, this person reviews, this person approves. 1, 2, 3, that's how it is, or even less. Having 2 people do it is even ideal, but just making sure you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen for your production of content. Then when you actually do produce the content, the people who are writing the content and reviewing it should have some reasonably good understanding of the best practices in general for content, blogging, public relations, PR releases, stuff like that. And so I've listed a few of these, like anchor texts, internal linking, H1 through H4 headers. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can look at as far as best practices. We have an awesome document here that I just took a quick screen grab of called Blogging Best Practices for Effective SEO. I don't believe this is currently available on our website, so if you want to get access to this document, just shoot me a note or put it into chat that you want to get into the question area that you would like to receive this document, and we'll make sure that someone sends it to you once we're all done here. But this is it's a few pages just on discussing best practices of content production, formatting, things like that. So these are things that you really kind of have to get a sense of of understanding prior to actually really launching these things, because if you build up a whole new website but you don't really know how to create content, it's not going to be that useful. If you are experts at creating content but your website won't work on a cell phone, that's not going to work either. So you kind of have to have these things as a prereq before we can really get into discussing how we're going to get to the promised land, how are we going to incorporate all these different things at once in a strategy that works.